Hi, everybody. My name is Jamie Johnston, and this is my presentation based off my practice research paper. And I chose to look at working with families and children in poverty. So, I decided to start off the presentation here by just including the abstract from my research paper to be sort of a good intro. So this hopefully will be kind of the one time that I'm reading something long. So within the field of social work, there is ample opportunity to work with children and families that are living in poverty. In this line of work, it is important to look at the potential causes of poverty as well as the immediate and long-term effects this can have on children and their futures, plus the increased risk of child maltreatment that often accompanies poverty. A better understanding of how all these affect each other can allow social workers to best serve these populations by educating and encouraging. Collectively, social workers can try to reduce stigma and be the boots on the ground that can help advocate for these families in a system that often feels stacked against them. So, first, we will just look at a little bit of kind of the history of hardships behind families in poverty. So, back in the 1900s, orphanages were a thing that were utilized quite often. And in doing some research for this paper and presentation, I found that even back in the earlier 1900s, if there were parents who financially felt like they could not take care of their children, those children would oftentimes end up in an orphanage. Since then, there have been a lot of pushes made to try and help families get out of poverty and remain as a family unit even in times of economic stress or difficulty. So in the 1960s, that's when they had the War on Poverty and kind of that movement. It was also around that time that different assistance programs were implemented, like Medicaid, food stamps, TANF, all of which, of course, were to try and contribute to the sort of war on poverty, helping families to be able to afford those basic needs and be able to take care of everyone in their household. Past and present, one thing that really stood out that I noticed in doing all my research was just kind of the idea that high poverty neighborhoods where it's very prevalent and you may see more of that generational poverty will oftentimes affect different areas of people's lives, such as kids not having access to as good of education or schools, higher rates of crime, just some different kind of overall negative effects. And once again, as I mentioned, that can be kind of generational. So, just an overview of current conditions in the United States. With this, I just want to start out mentioning I had kind of read somewhere that poverty, a lot of times when people hear that word, kind of picture like a third world country. You're not thinking about the United States and your own neighbors who may be experiencing this. And actually, as I was putting together my presentation, I went on Google to try and find some different pictures that I could use in my PowerPoint. And of course, when I was trying to include the word poverty in the searches that I was doing, I felt like I was getting a lot of photos from like third world countries. So that was just kind of interesting. But a quote that I had found in my research that stood out to me, talking about the United States, that even extensive economic growth has failed to lift millions of children out of poverty. And I found that about 1 in 3 children have unmet basic needs each year. So this can include things like housing, access to adequate food and nutrition, clothing, just some of those things that a lot of us probably kind of take for granted. And many times, the families that are even struggling a bit kind of fall above that sort of threshold as far as a lot of the assistance programs or things that are available. A lot of these families that are struggling are actually above kind of the guidelines that they have in place. And as I mentioned before, children that are growing up in income poor households or neighborhoods do seem to have a higher likelihood of chronic health issues, weaker academic performance, learning disabilities, emotional behavioral concerns. And then within the entire family, this can also lead to higher rates of depression and mental health, marital conflict, and unfortunately, even like abuse or maltreatment. So, one of the researchers that I came across was really trying to look at the correlation between poverty and the consequences that that can have on children. They broke it down into three different categories that I thought were really interesting to look at, so I wanted to share this. The first category was family and environmental. This was really kind of focused on knowing that every family, you know, low income or very wealthy are going to have stressors in their daily life. That's just part of life. But for those who are low income, you have that economic stress added on top of those already existing everyday stressors. So they were just kind of wanting to point out that those families with lower income have even more on their plate. The second category was looking at the investment perspective, just knowing that affluent families that maybe aren't struggling so much economically have the ability to invest more in their kids as far as their education. From a young age, being able to purchase books and easily afford to send them to school, eventually looking at trying to help send them to college, paying for them to be in extracurricular activities all throughout their childhood and growing up, versus families who may not be able to afford those things. So children can sometimes suffer, where others, like peers around them, are getting a little bit more. The last category is the cultural perspective, which looks at economic marginalization. Just kind of that category was really looking at different things in neighborhoods, once again, that might be lower income, where you are likely to see maybe some not great decisions being made by people as they're trying to sort of make a living and keep up. And then just knowing that younger kids in those situations are watching and may find these sort of learned behaviors and attitudes. And I just felt like that was really kind of looking at this being a good opportunity to really try and help kids grow up in positive situations, positive role models, understanding that even the way they grow up doesn't have to dictate, opportunities that they could have for themselves. So next, I'm just going to kind of go into the link between child development and maltreatment, since it has been pretty widely known that maltreatment and abuse are more prevalent in low-income homes. As I had mentioned earlier, the different assistance programs are in place, like Medicaid, food stamps, and TANF. Those, of course, are meant to be beneficial for families in poverty to try and kind of help improve their situation. Child care subsidies are also in place to help. These do vary from state to state as far as kind of the rules and regulations around them. So some of the research that I found really pushed for making that more available and accessible for families, just knowing that that's probably a big piece of it for families who might be in poverty or experiencing economic issues. Not having the access to affordable childcare can really be kind of the make or break between their ability to get out and seek work or do what they need to do to try and get more on their feet. 3-year-old Head Start was also mentioned as being a really great resource for any families that qualify. Just knowing that on top of your child getting like a good start on their education, there's a lot of resources available to families and then different screenings that they may also not have access to otherwise. So the child maltreatment and abuse kind of across the board, unfortunately, tends to happen at an age when the brain is really developing and growing. So this can have lasting effects if kids are being exposed to maltreatment or abuse later in life. It could lead to mental health issues, substance abuse issues, domestic violence, and even being a repeat offender with their own children. So to kind of wrap this up, just looking at sort of this area of social work and then my own personal thoughts, I think that working with children and families in poverty can be difficult, but is extremely rewarding. This is something I was able to do kind of in a certain capacity for about 10 years before I came back to school, and absolutely loved it. There are plenty of options within the social work field, to work with families. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities. I think probably one of the sort of harder parts of being in this profession can honestly just kind of be policy. It's hard to see families in poverty who are really working hard and trying to help themselves, but sometimes it just feels like things are stacked against them. I know I see a lot in social work people talking about sort of that cliff when families qualify for assistance and things that are helpful for them, and then as soon as they make a little bit more money, those are kind of just taken right out from underneath them. And of course, it can also be difficult that you can't force people to want to reach goals and achieve goals and do things. But personally, I'm super passionate about working with families in poverty. I think the success stories definitely make the hard days worth it. Right now, I'm leaning toward a career in more of a clinical field once I do finish this degree, but I'm always open to opportunities that could come up that might be a little bit more geared at working with families in poverty. So I really enjoyed putting together this research paper and presentation, and hope you learned a little bit, and I look forward to watching more of these.